appreciate everybody coming and participating here in our town hall meetings. It's always a nice turnout in Waverly, so that's great. I've got a sign-up sheet going around, so if you all would just kind of keep it moving around and to the back and try to get it through everybody, that would be great. This is my third year in the Iowa Senate. So I'm vice chair of the Veterans Affairs Committee, and I'm on the Education, Health and Human Services, State Government, and then Appropriations Subcommittee, or Appropriations Committees. Appropriations Committee is new for me. I've never been on that committee, so that I do this year, so.
Thank you.
I'm just gonna go over, the highlights of the session. We've always moved into it, so we've already started. Committee meetings is just getting underway. So, I'm just gonna give you the highlights of what's been going on. Everyone has talked about a little bit of her priorities, and after that, we'll have room for your questions. Most of the hour will be for your questions. So, well, first thing I always like to cover is the budget. We expect to pass a conservative budget as we have in years past, keeping in mind the priorities we need to fund for the state, the public safety, Medicaid, and education. We have a 3.8% tax cut that has gone into effect, so that's produced a dip in the state's revenue, but the surpluses have accumulated enough that we're able to dip into the surplus to be able to make sure that we're able to fund all of our priorities. But no matter what, there's always many more requests than taxpayer money can fulfill that come before us, and we always have to pick and choose and pick our priorities for funding. The governor's proposed her budget. Yeah, come on in. There should be a chair right there, and I know there's more chairs we can get out. Adam, you'll.
Yeah,
you know,
if we have people show up.
Pardon?
bring
Is
out.
that taken?
No, just for you, just gonna leave this door so we can get in if we need more chairs. You're good.
So the governor's proposed her budget, her plans to spend $9.4 billion from the general fund in 2026, which would be an increase of $486 million over the previous year. The major items in the governor's budget are a $102 million increase for supplemental state aid for schools, which is about a 2% increase. She's also proposing a $223 million increase for Medicaid, which is a pretty large increase, but the federal government has not kicked in as much money as they usually have. So we're having to use our funds to cover their shortfall, so to speak, and then the normal increase that we usually have to give them. This $223 million increase includes a $25 million nursing home increase for this year, and also a $19 million increase for Hawkeye, which is a children's insurance program. Another major funding provision of the governor's proposal is a $40 million payback to the Economic Emergency Fund, which was due to $40 million having to spend to cover natural disaster expenses due to the flooding in northwest Iowa, and also tornado damage in quite a few communities, but mainly you probably remember Greenfield and Minden from last year. It turns out 2024 was a record year for tornadoes in Iowa. 125 tornadoes touched down in realize that until I was looking through things. So it was a record year, like I said, and there's a seat right over here. Taxes, okay, I've heard a lot from people about property taxes, just the amount of increase that people have experienced from property taxes. And as you know, we've been going through a multi-year effort to, address the issue of property taxes. And we had, an initial bill in 2023 that we passed. And then this year, we're going to look at taking up, that issue again. So the idea is to leave more money in Iowans' pockets, and the, property taxes, in my view, are some of the most unfair taxes because they, go up whether your income goes up or not. So, it's a real burden on many people. The economy, the governor wants to have a nuclear energy task force, take a fresh look at energy sources for the state. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. I know that there's a private company interested in, reinitiating the nuclear plant at Palo. So we'll, kind of see how that progresses. Also, pharmacy benefit managers, I don't know how familiar you are with this, but this is a threat to our rural pharmacies. I've heard about it from Waverly Pharmacy here, pharmacy in Parksburg, pharmacy up in Charles City. The unfair business practices from the pharmacy benefit managers, and this is something I've worked on for several years to get, to bring, some regulations to those companies to ensure that business practices are fair for our rural pharmacies, and we can keep our rural pharmacies open. So I'm hoping again this year, the H&HS chair is very much, pushing for it. He has been pushing for it, and I've supported him in that, and so, I'm hoping we can get something done. Work requirements for Medicaid, that's something that, we're looking at installing again under the Biden administration. We weren't able to carry through on that, but, looking to reinstate that for able-bodied adults. Another issue that's coming up is a bill being proposed, a 5-year moratorium on expanding, the facilities for casinos in the state. The issue of healthcare, we're looking at again, continuing to work on the issue of, physician shortage in the state, increasing the funding for the loan repayment programs for healthcare and mental health care providers, and opening up the program to any healthcare provider who would commit to practice in rural Iowa for 5 years. Education, the governor is proposing to improve math and problem-solving skills with early identification intervention for students, additional professional development for teachers, and resources to help families at home. Also, we will be looking at, continuing, legislation dealing with DEI and CRT. We will also be looking at, a bill that will require schools to teach prenatal development in sex education class using a high definition video that will show every stage of development of a baby from fertilization until birth. So the goal being there is just to help create a culture of life in the state, to instill that sense of wonder and respect for human life. The governor is also interested in requiring schools to have a policy governing cell phone use during instructional time. Just a lot of concern there, a lot has been documented, regarding the mental health issues, of students, using cell phones on a frequent and regular basis, and almost continual basis. It's been shown to have a damaging effect. So, the governor here with this is going to try to balance a requirement to restrict cell phone usage with schools' ability to set their own policies regarding that. And I know some schools have already done that, but there are ones that have not, so that we will be taking a look at. We are looking also at conscience protections for healthcare providers, mental health counselors, and adoptive and foster parents to ensure they can carry out their job duties in accordance with their faith. Also, looking at eminent domain legislation. There's been a number of bills already introduced regarding protecting the private property rights of landowners. And I've introduced one, and I know I see others that have been introduced as well. And this is the 4th year to try to get something done on that front. And so we are ever hopeful that we can get something done on that. So that's gonna be an issue we will be working on. Protecting minors from online pornography, from sexually explicit materials in libraries, and from exposure to obscene performances. Those are things that we'll also be working on. Medical freedom issues, prohibiting discrimination by doctors against those that refuse the experimental drugs, and requiring schools to inform parents about exemptions from vaccinations. So those are a couple things that we'll be working on. The governor is prioritizing a hands-free driving bill, which would mean there would be only limited cell phone usage of while driving, and that if you're going to use your cell phone, it would have to be in a voice-activated mode. Election integrity, there's gonna be legislation regarding election integrity come forward. Government overreach, we still have not done anything to reform our public health disaster emergency laws, or just disaster emergency laws per se, to include greater protections for the rights of citizens, families, businesses, and churches during a public health disaster emergency. Right now, the way our law is, the governor has, almost dictatorial power with proclamations in the state during a disaster emergency, and so we feel that the legislature should share the burden of governing during that time, and that it should be stated that citizens' rights would be protected during those times. So that's just a quick rundown in a nutshell of priorities for the sessions and what the governor's thinking about. So I'd be happy now to take your questions or thoughts or comments. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Senator. You made mention of election integrity. And back in the latter part of November, I sent the following to you. Several years ago, the state of Iowa made changes to the absentee ballot timelines by shortening the time before an election when ballots could be mailed out and when they needed to be received. The result of that change and changes that have been made within the U.S. Postal Service that have resulted in longer time for mail to be delivered and received now leaves only about 3 days in which to be assured that a mailed ballot will be received in time to be officially Those most impacted by this slowed down mail service are rural voters. My question is, would you be willing to work within the state legislature to return the length of time for absentee ballot timelines to be in line with what they were previously? There are also states that can receive mail-in ballots, both red and blue states, as much as 3 weeks before they can even be mailed in Iowa. I serve as a precinct election official, and I'm aware of how difficult it would be for anyone to vote improperly and illegally. I rely on you and other legislators to defend and support the security of our voting system and not to cast doubt or suspicion on them. Now, thank you for your reply, which came the following day. However, your reply was one that simply told me how I could vote. And it didn't address my question of, would you be willing to work within the legislature to re-examine and bring back the previous standard by which ballots could be mailed out, the timelines. I followed up that same day that I got your reply, providing further information and rationale for why I was asking your help in this area. I sent you another reminder back in October. I sent you another reminder about the question in November. I sent you another reminder again in December. And I have never received a reply back on any of those. And so that's why I come here today. Because I'm only asking for a yes or a no from you. Would you be willing to work within the legislature to re-examine what the Iowa legislature has done in shortening that length of time, to consider the possibility of putting it back to where it was before? It's simply a yes or a no.
What I am willing to do is to work to ensure we have the most integrity in our election process we can.
That's
And
enough.
issues with absentee ballots are that the chain of custody is broken when once the ballot leaves the voter's hands and goes into the post office. And so it's not the best and safest way to cast a ballot. It is one we do and allow for people's convenience, but it is something that we're seeking to encourage people to go to the courthouse or to vote on election day, ways that would not break the chain of custody for the ballot.
Can I add something, can I say something about that? My son was studying abroad and he wanted to vote, and he had requested the absentee ballot, but it didn't get to him in time, so he couldn't vote. So there are instances that this is complete, we need more time for those absentee ballots. There's always these exceptions. He didn't have the opportunity to fly back to the United States to vote, and he didn't get his vote. He wasn't able to vote, and he was not happy about that.
Was that under the UOCAVA, the uniform, or the one the military uses though?
No, he's not in the military. He was a student,
A
a
student,
college
but
student.
overseas, but he would fall into that.
He was a college student, so he was not in the military, or he is a college student.
Okay.
Senator, I have a question on that too. You stated that when the ballot goes back into the postal service, it's not, secure, or you're worried about the integrity of that. But I would have to question why, because I remember my father, 3 years ago, he wanted to make sure his ballot was sealed, so he put tape on it. That's not legal to do that. So you would know if a ballot had been opened or not. So that's why they sent it back to him, to say you can't do this, because how do we know it was you who put the tape on or something? So I mean, I feel like there's really good oversight on that when the auditor's office receives those ballots, they look at them to make sure that they seal properly, and I think
As an election precinct official, if I'm assigned to work a different ballot, voting site, I'd have to use an absentee ballot. That was the case this year. My voting place is at Bartles. I was working at Redeemer Lutheran. And I can't vote outside of my precinct.
I'd like to add a comment as well. I would love to see Iowa consider an all mail-in ballot. There's other states, Colorado does it, Oregon does it. It works well, it gives the most accessibility to all voters. It's easy, it works well, and there's no integrity issues. So, back to your point, anything we can do to make voting more accessible to all of us is what we should really strive for, I think. So, I would love Iowa to consider other options that make it easier for everyone to vote.
If there is illegal voting, where are the prosecutions of those? Where are the charges being filed? How many? It just doesn't exist. It's a false narrative that voting is insecure, that vast numbers of people are voting illegal. That's not true. There's no substantiation.
Is there any chance in the mail, I agree, if they can't be resealed? What if the mail person just takes the ballot and destroys it?
the auditor's office has record when they've received them. So you could call the auditor's office, you can also go online to check that your ballot has been received.
But if it isn't, you know, by the time it gets notified, you got a problem. There's where your issue is with mail-in ballots. Part of the big reason I think we have secure voting is because most, by far most, of our people do manage to get a vote at the polling place or at the county courthouse. And I think that's important that we do have, continue that, so.
Other methods don't mean they aren't secure.
No, but the mail is probably one of the worst. Because it can be the ballots displaying not getting it.
If you like to the time that the ballots can be sent and received,
Yeah,
then
maybe an
it'd
answer.
be easier to check and make sure that.
Sure, and that may be an answer to do it. But the mail is not always accident.
I don't understand how other states can do it and not have an issue.
So look at the states that are doing it, and how do you know they don't have an issue?
I don't know what you mean by that.
Colorado, you know, it's a very liberal state.
That has nothing to do with it.
No, it doesn't make it wrong, but it certainly leaves it open to be problems with voting, with people voting that shouldn't.
Back there.
Yeah, I'd like to change the topic for a second. I'm very concerned about how the state is clawing local funding back to, pay for things that aren't local. So we used to have a portion of the property taxes that funded local things, that those were controlled by our county and by our city. The state, chose to take that back under the auspices of the state and promised to backfill that money. That has stopped happening. There was a promise of that happening forever. We no longer have those property taxes coming to pay for local things. Instead, they're going to pay for things in other parts of the state. Now we're talking about doing the same thing with our local option sales tax. We voted to raise our sales tax locally so that we could pay for local things. And now the state is talking about taking that to the state and then, oh, we'll backfill that, we'll give that money back to you. Well, you've already broken your promise with sales taxes. How do we know that you're not gonna again break your promise? And not by you, of course, Senator, but by the legislature, with the sales taxes. I'm very concerned. We were not able as a city to pay for things that we had been paying for 50 years, because the tax laws have been changed at the state, and it happened after we set our budget, so we weren't even able to do things. So, I'm just very disappointed with the state getting rid of local control and putting it all on the state.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Quick comment on the issue of absentee voting. I consider that a squirrel. That is a distractor to divert attention from issues of substance. You made a comment that property taxes are the most unfair of taxes. The governor has stated she wishes to eliminate income tax. If I were holding up a flag, I would say no taxation without income. I don't mind paying a portion of my income, whether it be from land rental, and as an old guy, I don't have to pay state tax on land rental or retirement income, thanks to policies passed recently. I don't think that's fair. I think that's giving money to rich old people at the expense of young people and the working middle class. I think that is an issue that could be rammed through. And by the way, my name is Robert Wyatt. I'm a graduate of Plainfield High School, and I registered as a Republican to vote for Bob Dole back in the day in a primary. That's where I'm coming from. So the question becomes, if the state moves away from income tax, where does the state get money? I only know of two other sources. One is property, the other is sales. Property, I don't mind paying income tax, because if I have income, I pay tax. If I have property, I have to pay another percent, and I improve my property, I have to pay another 1 or 2% every year forever. Is that fair? Does that encourage local investment? Now, it's true, if I pay income tax, that means what? Hey, I spent money in Iowa, didn't I? When I improved my house, that went to local carpenters, lumberyard, etc., right? So I would ask you, and we have not heard this at all, if the state, which has already moved away from income tax, where's it going? Are you talking property tax, sales tax? Is there another magical source of money we could use? Tariffs on imports into Iowa? Which is a tax on Iowans, by the way. Where's the money coming from?
Are you wanting me to defend having no income tax?
I want to know where the money is coming from. The comment back here was we're already seeing local property tax money diverted from local use to fund things elsewhere. And by the way, this ties in with something else I wanted to speak to, so excuse me for going on.
Okay.
I am so opposed to this school voucher thing as to phone. Put it up for a vote to the people.
Amen.
Put it up for a vote to the people. You are taking money from the public to give to special interests, and I don't care if it's Catholic, Baptist, Buddhist, or Satanist. You are taking money from the public to give it to special interests. And to me, that's unambiguous.
Yeah, just a follow-up question to that. Could you talk to us about the cost of the voucher program?
I don't have those figures off the top of my head.
320 million.
We do.
base.
We do.
It's not enough for this next year, and because it's low income.
Yeah, after this year, anyone can
Yeah,
get it.
anybody can.
All
These
the
guys
rich people.
have, I think of Dowling High School in Des Moines where our daughter lives, I mean, the kids go to Valley, but the amount of money that Dowling sucks out of West Des Moines School District.
So if you take,
Let's take the number 300-some million.
where does this money come from?
It's kind of a follow-up to your tax question.
3,200,000 Iowas, it's $100 for every man, woman, and child that were allocated that way, right?
So where, you're on the budget committee, appropriations committee, you're on the education committee, and it seems as if, we're kind of going down a rabbit hole that, I don't know where the money is coming from and what has to be cut in order to support the voucher program.
Public school
There's
funding.
not
Yeah,
money in the schools.
Well, if the state has to pay $320 million more,
Well, and I don't know what the percentage increase is or has been,
It's going up. Well,
but it's going up, so, I mean, I don't understand what the finances say to this.
It's a state aid, figure, 7,000 something per student, but
Right.
the
7,600 last year, I think it was.
state government, gives to each school district for their enrollment. And so for those that are enrolled in an ESA, that's the amount of money that would follow that student to the school of their choice. It's from state funding. Income tax, sales tax. and
But
other
no income
taxes.
tax.
But there's no tax money coming in, how are you gonna pay for it?
You're trying to.
Well, I was
raise
trying,
income tax.
that's something I was trying to say, there's a surplus, and so. in
Eventually,
order
that's
to-
gonna be gone.
There's no more surplus.
From the COVID
In
relief
order to,
fund.
the surplus has been,
Federal money.
the surplus has been accumulating for several years, we've accumulated it in order to
No.
implement.
But at the
No,
rate
money.
you're pulling money for vouchers,
That's an ongoing expense and you're using one-time money for an ongoing expense. That
Right.
makes no sense.
Has the legislature studied the state of Kansas, as well as 20 years ago, the state of Kansas did something similar? Where they got rid of their income tax, and then my daughter was in Kansas now, and they're still paying to get them back right again because it was a fiasco. There was no money that came in, they didn't have anything to cover anything, so then they went back to normal things, and they're still paying high taxes just to try and get themselves out of it.
And if I might, one thing that should be noted, when you look at the cost to attend a charter school, Catholic school, I think it was one of the Dowlings out of Dubuque maybe, those tuitions are way and above, 3, 4, 5,000 above the 7,800 or 7,600, whatever it is that comes from the state. That means ain't no poor people benefiting from this, right? It's going to the middle class and upper class now, because they're getting rid of the income test. So this isn't benefiting poor people. That's another distractor. That's part of the vocabulary, but that's not a reality.
This is not the same
And
requirements.
somebody's gonna take it down the throat of the Republican Party at some point. Cause it's an issue. I think we
It's
saw
gonna
that right
destroy
here.
our little town schools.
It's
Yeah, we
destroying
won't-
our communities.
We won't have schools anymore.
Valley is lost.
If we have them, and you've got, and here's the follow-up question. We got all this, you're on the education committee. Are you applying exactly the same standards to these charter, oh, I'm Christian? Well, what Christian? Well, to Christian will pass the plate. There's all sorts of denominations. They do it, St. Paul's does an excellent job, no question, right? So I'm not against religious schools, but you can just hang up a sign and say, I is, and you are, in terms of getting the money. What are they, are you regulating what's in their libraries?
There's accreditation standards that.
Is there, really? I haven't
Not for,
read it.
not for
Right,
private
not for
schools,
them.
not for private
Not for the
schools.
private schools.
Then you go to answer questions.
Interference with religion, they fly with what, how does it fly? Some are excellent, who knows what others are? It's a major issue.
I have a feeling the private schools are doing better on educating the kids. And a lot of them, this woke agenda, this boys, I don't know if it's still going on, but I'm hearing stories of boys and girls sharing the same bathroom. I don't know if it's going on in Iowa, but around the country, that is the most asinine thing I've ever heard of. That's my opinion.
Well, we passed a bill last session that schools have to, keep students in the bathroom.
So that's
responding to their
done with
sex
then, right?
In schools, yes.
I think that's another swirl.
Yes.
Yeah.
There are studies showing that the other states with vouchers, the test scores for the students in the private schools are lower than the test scores for the students in the public schools. So unfortunately, while, you know, everyone has opinions, the studies show that the religious schools do not do as well at educating our students in order to get into jobs and to go to college than the public schools do. Now, that's not for Iowa, we haven't run those studies, but they have run them in other states, Arizona in particular, and I believe there was one in one of the Carolinas, and the test scores were statistically different and lower. So I'm sorry, but
Do you know the source of that
I do,
information?
I do. If you send me your email, I will send it to you.
Plus, the private schools can reject students. My granddaughter's severely disabled, for example. The public schools have to take her and work with her and provide her with an individual education plan. The private schools can reject and say, no, we don't want that student. That student's disruptive, we don't want that. The public schools, I think someone once said, as you do unto the least of these, you do unto me. Someone said that. Who was that?
Black book,
It's in black, right, with a little red ribbon down the middle of it. As you do unto the least of
Go
these.
ahead.
I'm kind of going off that subject, but I have a question about, we have a lot of food deprived children in the state of Iowa, that number keeps going up. The governor's declined to use, I realize it's a federal program, but she's declined to use it twice now. What are we going to do with these children? I mean, these food banks are overwhelmed. I know the story on the news last night when the one in Cedar Rapids is just, they've had to find a different building because they have so many people that need food. And our children are suffering because of it.
And can you explain, what was the rationale for turning that down?
I don't remember, I'm sorry, I can't explain that.
Could you find that out and let us know?
she thought some Iowa program was better.
No.
But these people were denied that money to buy fresh fruits and vegetables, which is a necessary food for children growing and such. And she says, well, we have obesity in the state. Well, that program is ourselves.
I know that there's a program to, or a proposal to increase the funding for, the SNAP program, or purchase of fruits and vegetables. I know that's coming through in the legislature, so we'll see.
If I'm not mistaken, Governor wanted to do these boxes.
Yeah,
And then
there's
somehow
this
the people are supposed to get them.
Yeah.
But there's transportation issues, a lot of these people can't go and pick up boxes. Not to mention, people sometimes have different food intolerances, yeah, issues. So really letting the families decide what they're going to prepare is best, because if you give people a box with bread and they have celiac, that's not very helpful.
Perhaps if we raised the minimum wage, there wouldn't be quite as much hunger.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's still like 7 something, isn't it?
Yeah.
In Iowa?
Higher if you're cutting arrows. I wonder if there's a bit in the kitchen.
reading online that a bill requiring educators to teach students that life begins at conception was passed through subcommittee last night. You were
Yes.
this bill. Am I correct in reading also that that would be required of public schools to teach, and also that that would begin at the first grade level?
Well, our bill is 7 through 12.
Okay. And that would also be required in all the private schools as well?
I can't remember the exact, but that's also
No.
required. Right?
No.
Go ahead.
No.
Not required.
One statistic, well, I'll put it this way, I had occasion to follow my grandson over to Green for a middle school basketball game. Little sign outside the front door, 30% of the students at North Butler are low-income food assist qualified. There's a lot of stereotypes about how things are in Iowa. You look at land ownership, right? What has happened since I grew up on the farm to the concentration of wealth that we see in this state right now? And money talks. Will Rogers, I think it was, said, we've got the best legislature, best government money can buy. Right? Money talks. Poor people don't vote. And if we get distracted, we don't pay attention to the issues that count. And it's so easy to, the line I've used, I think it was in Peanuts or something, there's always a squirrel, right? To distract us from what we're focused on.
I think social issues are a big distraction and making more than it should. As a parent of a queer kid who is a wonderful person, it's really disheartening to see the vitriol and the hate that the legislation puts towards these people. And my kid is pre-med, getting A's, will be taking the MCAT, and wants so much to work as a doctor in Iowa. And here, we all hear, oh, Iowa, we need doctors. But Iowa hates my kid. And it's heartbreaking. And I wish the legislature would quit putting this false attention towards some of these social issues and distracting from the true things, the economy that's needing help, or education. And we're not the only family in Braemar County that has a queer kid. And my parents are Republican farmers, and they love my child and accept them. And unless you are willing to open your heart and actually learn about this, you're gonna stay closed-minded. And it's been through the millennial that we've had queer people, but with social media and with the ability to communicate so quickly, things get shouted and said and twisted. And I just feel that my take on what some things are being said, the more you say it, it becomes true, even though things aren't true. Things are being said and told to people that are incorrect. And people, if they don't have any reason to research things or find good sources of information, you're just gonna believe what you've been told over and over. So all this hate towards the queer community is so disheartening. And I wish Iowa would just leave everybody alone. Let us do our own things. Let people do their own things. Because there's some great people who you're really affecting in a negative way, and you're gonna regret it. Because they're gonna leave, and you're gonna say, hey, we need more doctors in Iowa. Well, you're scaring a lot of the qualified, good people away, because some of these people love other people who are queer. Maybe it's their brother or sister, and they're like, I've had it. You're treating my family and friends like trash. I'm out of here. So that's my little
Quick
spiel.
question, how many of you have grandkids that are out of state? A lot of different reasons, economic, cultural, and Nazis burn books. When I went to Fremont number 3 up in rural Butler County, it was Lincoln in front of the fire reading, Americans read books. Fascists and Nazis are afraid of the truth. Americans question and challenge. I go back to Jim Leach, Bob Ray, or Republicans, okay?
Yeah.
That was socially liberal, if you will, fiscally conservative. Copper wire was invented, you know, and two German farmers picked up a penny at the same time. Right? So yeah, you stretch the money. Only cost a nickel, but who had a nickel? So my generation and a fair number of folk here are aware of that, right?
Be careful who you hate, might be somebody you love.
Yeah.
My biggest concern, I think of all, is our national debt. We could be on a path to self-destruction. We're gonna be paying, I would guess maybe 1.2+ million just to service the debt, and that's horrendous. And that's not really your problem, it's our problem. It's the people we've elected that, you know, no one wants a balanced budget anymore. They used to talk about it. No one, this last election, I didn't hear a balanced budget mentioned at all. And I think we're headed for disaster if we keep on this trend that we're on. We're spending $1 trillion every 3 months or some crazy amount like that. It's not sustainable.
That tax cut to the rich, that'll add trillions to the debt.
Yeah.
That's a Republican position.
I'm just, you're on the education committee, and I'm concerned about what we're seeing with the decline in Iowa's rankings for public education, for education. We used to be right at the top, we're now solidly average at best. And I'm just wondering, could you talk to us a little bit about what your plans are, what ideas you would bring to address that declining state of education in Iowa?
And as you do so, would you please speak to how you would advise or recommend to someone that they go into education in Iowa? Into public education in Iowa, or private sector education, as far as that goes. Why would you do that?
Well, one thing, we did last session was to require a redoing, so to speak, or a review of the Iowa standards. Iowa's got the Common Core standards, English language, arts, and math. And then we've got the next generation science standards, and we got the C3 social studies standards, and Iowa's adopted those, and so the Department of Education is gonna do a review of those standards and see where we could make some improvements. And that's one of the things that I was talking about when I was talking about the government, particularly focus on math in this session. So, but even if we make changes in that, it's still the local schools that implement those standards or actually do the teaching in accordance with those standards. So there's a lot more involved than just the legislature taking action. We do provide increases every year for our schools, and
would you be willing to vote for a greater increase of the allocation to education than the 2% that you referred to?
that's what the governor's proposing.
But what are your
Well,
thoughts on that?
I don't know at this point, it's very early yet, but it has to be balanced with everything else the state has to do. The Medicaid funding, the many requests that come before us in the legislature, public safety. Everybody is needing funding, and we have to balance that the best we can.
And there's kind of the horns of the dilemma, which is we cut taxes, which cuts the revenue.
It's kind of like quitting your job.
Well, that's why I was saying, in order to make Iowa competitive, several years ago, we, decided to implement a round of tax cuts, and it's been coming through over several years to get Iowa's income tax rate to be competitive with the states around us. Well, when you cut taxes, initially, it results in a dip in the revenue that you're gonna get. But with people having more money, eventually that filters out to,
Smoke and mirrors.
Smoke and mirrors.
to be a larger increase in the economy, which then translates into additional tax revenue in years to come. So it's more of a long-term plan, but the reason we've accumulated our, the surplus we have is to be able to use it in those intervening years, when the tax revenue dips until the, increases.
But if we're cutting the income tax, but I don't understand the logic of that.
Instead of cutting the taxes, why don't we look at, is everybody paying their fair share? I don't mind paying taxes, but I don't make a lot of money anymore, never did. But it makes me really mad to hear about people that get all kinds of loopholes and don't have to pay a penny, but they have all kinds of money that they could be paying.
The governor's proposed, 2% increase in education spending. That's less than inflation.
Yes.
And it has been, so the increases stayed less than inflation for a number of years. If you go back 15, 20 years ago, they were getting regularly 4% increase, and sometimes higher. There were years where they got a 7% increase. And now for the last, I don't know how many years, it's been pretty consistent at 2%, which really has not kept up at all. And I know people say, well, don't keep throwing money at things that don't work, but when you talk about inflation and you talk about increase, and so now we're steadily below.
Well, a lot of people's wages have either dipped or not kept with the pace of inflation. So, you know, the struggle's all around.
I think the legislature raised,
Come on in, it's a town hall meeting.
I think the legislature raised salary for a teacher after 10 years for 62,000. Have you priced out an SUV or a new car lately? If the state wants to
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
If the state wants to do something on employment, it would sponsor childcare.
Yes.
Yes.
The biggest impediment, given that it takes two people working in the household to survive in the economy we have, the biggest impediment, you talk about being pro-life and all that, that's all fine, and I hope the movie shows everything from conception all the way through to birth, although conception might have a problem. When does the movie start? That's what I want to know.
We're talking about here.
Childcare. It can cost more than the minimum wage, to say the least, to put a kid into childcare. So if mom, you know why they're not having kids? They can't afford it. If the state wants people to work, sponsor, pay for, subsidize childcare, that would enable employment to take place. If you've got two kids in childcare, that's a chunk of money. And it eliminates the incentive to work and have kids.
Go ahead, Sean.
As a member of the Waverly Sheriff School Board, I had the privilege to sit down for 2 hours to review our budget situation yesterday morning, looking at it under the guise of the 2% increase in SSA. I have to be careful what I say here. I will say that WSR is in a great position, And as such, it's very hard to then tell you that the amount of money that we have available to give to teachers in the form of a step up in, wage is laughable. And we are at a point where we're starting to have to talk about whether we can afford this or curricular changes. And we're one of the better situated school districts in the state. The amount of school districts, if you do 2%, that are gonna have to go on budget guarantee is gonna be a very big number. It was around 140, it's gonna jump up. We're gonna get over half our school district, and you know that's gonna come out property tax, Sandy. This is a shell game. You have to draw in the state income, and you have to give public schools money. And I know it's in lockstep with this voucher program, but you can't afford to underfund public education. That's our future, that's our kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
So changing the subject again, because I think we've talked about some really important things, I wanna talk about healthcare in Iowa. I have two issues that I wanna bring up, and I'm just gonna speak to them briefly. The first is ambulance services for rural communities. Many of our communities in the state do not have ambulance service, so if we are talking about people who are living on a farm and have a health emergency, where is the ambulance coming from? The other thing I wanna talk about is Iowa Healthcare Marketplace, which is currently a duopoly. There are only two different companies that the Iowa Healthcare Marketplace can purchase from. If we had joined the national marketplace, which we had the opportunity to do, we would actually have competition and our healthcare costs would be lower. But because we chose to go it alone, we only have two bloated corporations whose only job seems to be to deny me healthcare coverage. And I am tired of paying thousands and thousands of dollars for healthcare where people in other states have the ability to have actual healthcare insurance. And so I really would like the state to look into joining the national healthcare marketplace so that we can actually have a competitive system.
And we need it desperately. 10 days ago, I had occasion to be at the pharmacy. A gentleman came in and said, I need 2 prescriptions, my wife needs 1. The pharmacist said, that'll be $960 copay. $960 copay. That's a lot of money. I don't know whether that's every 30 days or 90 days. And that's because of the healthcare system and the way the state and the feds approach it. Other countries do so much better, it's pathetic.
We're gonna face another interesting situation with the current fever for deportation of undocumented residents of our state. We're gonna see difficulty in meat processing plants being able to get adequate workers. We're gonna see problem in construction areas. Dairy.
Restaurants?
Yep. You got a lot of people in this state who are good people.
Hardworking people.
Going after as though they're some kind of vicious vermin. They're not. They're neighbors. And our governor is so eager to send our National Guard down to the border.
Our country has laws, and it's illegal to enter this country without any type of permission. There's places they can go to become citizens or whatnot. We have all kinds of people waiting in line that I think it's probably been on hold for the last 4 years, and we've got millions of illegals coming in.
Yes, we have people waiting in line who were ready to show up when the current administration was inaugurated, And all of those people in line were just told no.
Do you think we should get rid of the
I'm talking
criminals?
about, no, I'm talking about the people.
ones that committed
We're
murder?
talking about the one who are waiting in line.
Just-
But this
I'm
is
talking
federal, this is really not the senator's job.
I'm talking about
You
murderers that
hold
we're
it and
getting rid of.
let him finish speaking. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just saying that we have laws to go by, and my gosh, are we at a state, I know the unemployment is low, but are we at a point that we're too cotton picking lazy to do some of these jobs? I grew up on a farm, I did some of the most strenuous work you can think of. And we were a family financially challenged, we never considered ourselves poor. Poor is a state of mind. But we're gonna let illegals come in here to do jobs that we're too cotton picking lazy to do ourselves? If it takes more money for these jobs, let's pay it. I'd rather pay more money than have illegals come in here. Who's that
Companies
little,
are hiring.
there's college students, that the people that have been murdered by illegals. And something has to be done there. And I agree, there's a lot of good people that came in here just to benefit themselves and their family. But somewhere along the line, we've got to sort all those out, so. I'm saying we should be able to furnish our own labor without having to hire, to bring in illegals and look the other way as they cross the border. That's my opinion, folks, so.
We'll see.
90% of you will disagree with me, but that.
Sandy, if I could go back to healthcare real quick.
Yeah.
One thing that I think we can do in Iowa, and we've talked, and I think you've been supportive of this in the past, is strengthening our laws regarding health insurers related to the pharmacy benefit. Because I see it all the time. There are contracts that are completely unfair. They're unfair to our seniors. And they have gag clauses that disallow me from even telling people what's going on. And we've had some legislation that has helped so far, but the Iowa Insurance Commissioner just lacks the teeth. They get pushed around by these three companies, CVS Health, Express Scripts, and Optum, which is United Healthcare. They own 80% of the drug prescription business across the country. And when we get close to getting something passed, all the lobbyists fly in from nationals and they just flood the market. And it disallows transparency, and that's all we're asking for. Just show people what the medicine costs, show the rebates. I know what they are. They're gross. And seniors pay more money because of that shell game. And all we need to do is just illuminate it. Disallow the rebate program. Let us tell what's going on and just shine some light on it, because these three companies, they're constantly in court. They're constantly settling out of court for millions and millions of dollars just to protect this. And it's sad. And it directly does nothing for Iowa. It does nothing for Iowans. It's not even a partisan issue. It's just a healthcare cost issue. And we lost more independent pharmacies in the last 5 years, record numbers, because you just have to sign a contract where 10% of what goes out the door, you actually lose money on. I buy the medicine for less than I sell it to the person walking out the door. And it's just, you shouldn't have to do business that way. And it hurts rural Iowa more so than the metropolitan areas, because you just can't, sometimes the pharmacy was the last place left as a healthcare destination in many of these small towns. And it's not that they were bad business people. It's that they got pushed around by these are Fortune 20 companies, like the richest of the rich companies. So I'm a capitalist. I agree that, if you do a good job you should be rewarded for that. But there is monopolistic intent in some of this as well too. So we can talk offline, but that is something that we can do in Iowa that I think is a nonpartisan issue that can have an impact.
It's being worked on, I can tell.
Yep.
Ryan?
Yes, right, yep. I know, hopefully we can get to a vote this year. I know you were supportive I know you were supportive of the bill last year, just we couldn't get it to a vote.
Yeah, well, I think he's taking a little different approach this year. He's breaking it up into pieces, and he's got the governor's support on some of it. So hopefully we can you know.
Whatever you need to do.
Get something, whatever we need to do to, you know, get that all reined in.
Just one more question, can you talk a little bit about why the legislature is, kind of stripping the state auditor's, purview of different areas across the state, saying, no, you can't audit this, why is that happening?
I know with some things that he was investigating were not areas that the auditor typically gets into. And so there were some guardrails put around his investigatory powers to rein them back to what they normally would be. I think we put that either in last session, session before. I think he was getting into, you know, various details with healthcare, various details with academic records that aren't normally something part of the,
But
what
would
a
they be
state
good things
auditor.
for the state auditor to be looking at?
The state auditor generally is just tasked with looking at fiscal records, of a city or county. They mainly just look at, like I say, their books, fiscal books. That's generally what they've been doing, just to make sure taxpayer dollars are spent what they're supposed to be spent for. That's supposed to be the focus of the state auditor's office.
The way it was handled created the very distinct impression there was something to hide.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm inclined to think that's true.
I have read that some group in education is looking at the science standards and trying to remove evolution and climate change from the standards. Do you know anything about that?
Well, the standards are being looked at now. The Department of Education is reviewing them, and, I think it would be a good idea if they move those topics out.
Yeah.
Why?
They're science.
We need to know what's going on. Our kids need to know what's going on.
Smoke and mirrors.
What did you
Well,
say?
Smoke and mirrors.
Which is the smoke and mirrors? Moving it out or getting it in?
Removing it out.
Okay, didn't know which.
It's trying to hide something that doesn't need to be hidden. It's like,
Okay, I hate to
what's
cut it off.
the objective?
I have got to get to Charles City for a town hall meeting.
No, please come back. Thank you very much.
Let us vote on school vouchers. Let us vote on
Yes.
school vouchers.
Put it up to
So
the
the
people.
We can get a hold, I'm speaking right now. You can get a hold of my newsletter, you can see when the next town hall meetings are, you have more to say, you can come to those, you know, they're in other town stuff.